Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
Hello and welcome to the Holy Moment Podcast, the podcast where we watch movies with you, discuss the moments that work, the moments that don't, the moments that reflect truth in unexpected ways. Was this an unexpected movie for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's Stanley Kubrick. And guys, I'll be so honest with you. Like, I went to film school. Everyone loves to talk about how great Stanley Kubrick is. And for being a film person, I think the only thing I've seen from his 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I've only seen a third of it. I've only seen the middle portion, which in my opinion is the best from what I saw, because the other bits I fell asleep during in film class. But I don't have a lot of exposure to Stanley Kubrick. But going into this movie, I felt a pressure. Like, okay, we have a podcast. We're film majors. You know, we've been to film school. We've worked in the film industry. I gotta have a good take on this man's movie. And I was surprised with how funny it was. Like, I was not expecting it to be. It was a weird movie. This was like, am I crazy? This was weird, right?
No, it was 100% weird. Which is interesting because the main character, and I think this is intentional, main character's kind of boring.
Yeah. He has like lifeless eyes. It was so funny. Anytime we had like a close-up on him, it just looked like no one was home. It looked like he was, I don't know what's happening at all points in my life.
It works for the character. I don't know how intentional that was on the part of Ryan Tatum, but it works for the character. I still think that his best role was in Paper Moon, which we watched for the podcast. Y'all should check it out. It's a great episode. But, I mean, I guess I should tell the audience what movie we're watching, because we've been talking about Stanley Kubrick and Paper Moon and Ryan Tatum. We're talking Barry Lyndon, folks. That's right, the Barry Lyndon. Y'all might have seen some fan cams on Twitter, TikTok, what have you. You know, sweeping landscapes, beautiful set design. Mwah, chef's kiss. Really gives meaning to the phrase, every frame a painting.
Oh yeah, it 100% could have just been like any frame you could make your wallpaper. And like, I don't say that lightly. It's just, you could just scrub to any like 3 minutes and 20 seconds and just screenshot and be like, oh, that's my wallpaper now.
You can tell that they spent a lot of time looking at art pieces in museums depicting the era. The compositions, again, felt very painterly and from a very specific era of painting. You know, paintings of great people.
I'm sure we'll get into it in the podcast, but I'm really curious what drove and inspired the cinematography, because this is based on a book. Almost all of Stanley Kubrick's movies are adaptations of books or plays. And I'm curious, I've never read the book, but the book that it was based on, I wonder if any of that painterly style crept through on the pages, or was this Stanley Kubrick's intentional adaptation from page to cinema from the lens and his understanding of like, this is how I can elevate the story. So I'm curious if there's any correlation in the adaptation or just his interpretation of it.
I think he was very intentionally trying to capture an era by appealing to paintings from the era. I know there's that famous painting of the founding fathers surrounding a table and they're signing the Declaration of Independence. And a lot of these shots had that same feeling. We were witnessing a momentous event. So this movie came out in 1975. And that's why I chose this movie, is because this category, the category for this movie is 70s flick. It's a movie that's been on my Letterboxd watch list for a long time. Very happy that we're getting the opportunity to discuss it now. Budget was about $11 to $12 million, but it brought in about $20 million.
I'm curious if the like box office and like the production company that made it, which I think was Warner Brothers, I wonder if they were disappointed in that, because like, just, I mean, would think doubling your money, 12 to 20 million is about double. You think that's pretty good. But I also know, like, they say movies have to like double just to like, or even quadruple just to like make their money back, let alone make any on top of it. So I wonder if this was considered on a monetary side a failure. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, whatever it was considered monetarily, it's definitely stayed in the cultural consciousness for a long time since, and deservedly so, I think. This movie won several Oscars. I'm sure you've looked this up, but can you guess them at the top of your head?
I have not. I know it won Best Cinematography, right?
It did, in fact, win Best Cinematography. I would have rioted if it didn't.
Yes, that's the only one I was pretty sure about. Oh, well, I'll just go ahead since we talked about it. I'll go Best Adaptation. Best Adaptation
It was
for the Screenplay.
nominated, but yeah, it did not win Best Adapted Screenplay. It did win, though, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design,
Oh.
and Best Original Score.
Okay, score was going to be my next guess. And then, I mean, I didn't even think about, obviously, best costume and best art direction.
You just feel so immersed in it, so in the story that you almost fail to notice.
Yeah. I do think, because I'm not a big, like, art direction and costumes. It's not something I always notice in, like, movies, especially in period pieces. It just seems like, of course, it's a period piece. You have to put them in period accurate clothing. But I do remember thinking the outfits, probably because thanks to the cinematography, but I do remember specifically being like, wow, these outfits are amazing. I love when he first joined the British Army and they're in these, like, they're called the Redcoats. We all know, like, during the, not the Civil War. What is it?
Revolutionary War?
During the Revolutionary War, you know, they're called the Redcoats. They're the bad guys. We know that term. But when I really saw them in these red coats, it just brought a whole new, like, life to it. It was almost kind of funny and fake, but at the same time, kind of was formidable. I really did love the outfits.
Yeah, it felt very true to the time, which I don't know how much of the time, I don't know how true it is actually, but my feeling as a viewer was that I felt so immersed. These outfits felt so in place. The way that these characters behaved felt so in place. You can tell that this was a well-researched movie.
When I was doing a bit of background reading and research on the movie, I saw that Kubrick always wanted to do an adaptation on Napoleon, or just a movie about Napoleon's life, but it never came to fruition for a few different reasons with studio and money backing and everything. But apparently a lot of the time and energy and years spent researching that really aided him in this movie because of, I guess, the time period and everything.
Yeah.
I'm bad at history. Napoleon, is that around the same time period or no?
It's around the same time period, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe a little later.
Okay.
I will say, speaking of Napoleon, Napoleon's often lumped in with this group of so-called great men. There's this great man theory that states that, I don't know, there are certain individuals that are so exceptional that they cannot help but excel and lead great armies. And it's almost a Nietzschean will to power thing. But when you watch this movie, we're watching a guy that isn't particularly remarkable. He's just a dude, right? He's not particularly clever. He's not particularly brave. He has moments of cleverness. He has moments of bravery. But it really feels like he's taking the path of least resistance throughout the entirety of this movie. I don't know if that was communicated to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge theme of this movie is fate versus destiny, or kind of how they go hand in hand. And I feel time and time again, it almost feel like Barry Lyndon was a very non-active protagonist. Something we talk about in film school all the time. Like, you need an active protagonist. If your protagonist, if life is just happening to them, not a good movie. In my personal opinion, I'll probably get hate for this, but we talked a lot about this in The Big Lebowski. I shockingly did not like The Big Lebowski. And one of the reasons was I didn't like how much the dude was so unmotivated to do anything. He was so laid back. And I get that's part of his character, but it didn't work for me personally. And I get it's a comedy, so his laid backness led into the comical routine of things happening to him, but ultimately didn't enjoy it. This movie, the main reason it worked for Barry Lyndon to be a non-active protagonist, in my opinion, is the narrator. So throughout the movie, you know, we get Barry Lyndon from a young age all the way up until kind of his demise as he goes through this long life. But we have this omnipresent kind of narrator who just knows everything. And he's just narrating Barry Lyndon's life. A difference between the book and the film adaptation was, in the book, the perspective is told from Barry Lyndon's perspective, and he was an unreliable narrator. We didn't always know when he was telling if it was the truth. But something that Kubrick did, he shifted the POV to being a narrator, and the narrator knew everything. The narrator would come in and say, and now Barry Lyndon did this, and then Barry Lyndon did this. And it allowed me to be okay with our main character, Barry, being so passive, because it almost felt like his life was destined. No matter what he was going to do, he was going to go down this path because I already knew what was going to happen via the narrator. So I like that he was this character that went with the path of least resistance and this fate and destiny type of tone or theme that Kubrick went with.
Yeah, and the narrator also gives us a little extra context that we might not get directly from the character. We know that he is someone with goals and ambition. And so unlike the dude, his goal isn't to stay static. His goal is to excel. It is to climb up the social ladder and become a person of import. It's just that the choices he's making is he's going through the closest door available to him.
I was really surprised when he first sets out. He has the duel with the lover of his cousin. Just what I really took away from this movie as a side caveat? I think Barry Lyndon was just horny, and just the path of least resistance is wherever led him to his next woman he could sleep with was Barry Lyndon's MO. Not entirely, but after he has the duel with the person that's going to marry his cousin that he's pissed about because he wants to marry his cousin. But I did look it up. It was normal for the time, so I guess a little less weird. I was really hoping he was going to be painted as a freak, like he's in love with his cousin and everyone's going to ostracize him, but everyone was just like, oh, what a cute young lad wanting to marry his cousin. Just sign of the times. So after he leaves his hometown, I was really surprised when he just joined the military. Because again, it felt like with the narration and the setup of the movie, Barry Lyndon was going to be this great, like you said, like Napoleon, like these men that were painted as nothing could stop them. He was going to be a great, prolific man because of his actions. And then he was just like, I got robbed, so I joined the military, and I didn't really know what else to do. So I was just really surprised. But I think that was the first shift in tone to really show how much of a go with the flow type of character he was. And then the rest of the movie, it was just this, things just worked out for him. He just looked at women and they said, what if I cheat on my husband with you? That'd be pretty cool. And they did.
Exactly. I mean, he's leaving his home. He comes to the village. They're recruiting for the army. He's like, oh, I guess I could probably get ahead that way. Tries it out, doesn't like it, happens upon a gay couple, steals their papers. He's like, oh, their papers are there. I can probably flee with this. He does that, leaves. He starts talking to the Prussian general, starts schmoozing with him, gives away that he's a fraud. He's kidnapped. He saves the man's life. And one could call that bravery, but it's a kind of bravery that anyone's really capable of in the moment, I feel. And he has this person that is now loyal to him and wants this man's best interest, of course, given the understanding that Barry Lyndon, or Redmond Barry, will benefit this Prussian general. But still, he's established a rapport and is sent on this mission. No desire for loyalty, folds immediately to this other Irishman, goes gambling across Europe with him. Yeah, it's just, again, path of least resistance. No commitment to principles or really patience. It's just whatever's before me that will allow me to inch up slightly.
I want to push back ever so slightly on something you said. I will agree that I do think Barry Lyndon, for the most part, is his path of least resistance. But what I do appreciate, maybe by the end of the movie, Barry Lyndon's pretty despicable for what he's doing. There's not a lot of redemption left for him. And we could talk about that with the duel with Bullington later. But he started on a high, and the whole movie he was kind of trajectorily becoming worse and worse of a person. But the scene Jeffrey was talking about where he had the option to save this general, this Prussian general, and he did. I'm happy. And at this point, he was kidnapped and forced into the Prussian military for being found out that he was a faker. So he didn't want to be there. He had no loyalty there. He could have run away. But I do think that Barry Lyndon was a more three-dimensional character in the sense of he just was so directionless, but he wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't necessarily a lazy, evil, selfish person, but he wasn't a good virtue person either. So I'm happy throughout the film we see different facets of Barry maybe doing good, but ultimately the path of least resistance did lead him to a greedy, kind of self-satisfying end, which ended him with no leg in the long run.
Yeah, all of his easy choices led to him being, I guess, a difficult man.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, the easy choices led to him being a difficult man, but the good choices led to good things, like him saving the Prussian officer. It led to him getting a promotion. And the Prussian officer even was like, hey, if you keep working hard, we can give you a cushy job in the military and the Prussian government. All will be good. And I mean, that's a pretty decent setup for life. There are definitely worse ways to live your life, especially, coming kind of from nothing. Your father died young in a duel, and then you got kidnapped by the Prussian military. Worse ways to end up. But the moment something better came along, the moment something that was more advantageous for him, and not even just advantageous, but easier, like you said, it's kind of hard being a worker. What if I just went with this gambler? He immediately dipped. And the moment he started doing things selfishly for himself, that's when I think the road started to slide.
No, I'm with you 100%. And a part of why these decisions came so easily to him is because he does have some measure of natural talent, right? He is a good dueler. He is good at spotting things and good at communicating things subtly. He's a rogue. That's what he is by nature. Perhaps early on he is, I hesitate to say more principled, but certainly not as depraved a rogue as he would eventually become. But, as they say later in the film, Redmond Barry is clever enough to gain a fortune. He does not have the cleverness to keep it.
That is a great, great line. It's second only to one, but maybe we'll get to that best line later on in the movie. I assume Jeffrey knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, he is a charismatic character. I mean, again, why else would all these women sleep with him? And I mean, he is an attractive character too, but he doesn't know what to do with it once he gains power. And it's also interesting that I don't know if he really knows what he's searching for. It is also this idea of other characters who seek out money and fortune are very greed driven. I feel like he almost was just there's even I would say halfway through the movie, we get through, he leaves home, he joins the army, he deserts the army, he gets forced into the Prussian military, he escapes the Prussian military, and then we get introduced to Mrs. Lyndon, who he eventually marries. And in the middle of the movie when he meets her, there's kind of this voiceover from that omnipotent narrator. And he was saying Barry Lyndon did what most young men do. They kind of give up on love and they just want to focus on finding a woman that can bring them comfort. And so it's this idea of he's not necessarily striving to be powerful. He's not necessarily driven to have money out of greed. He's more just aimless. And he's I guess it'd be nice to have a house and to have some money. And then again, once he becomes so weirdly successful at it, he wants more and more. But again, this is a movie of Barry Lyndon wanting more, but not realizing it. He's not a greedy character from the beginning who is I'm going to scheme my way to the top. That's what I thought this movie was. When I read the log line, I thought this was a poor man who is going to scheme, backstab, murder, do whatever he needs to get to the very top. But Barry Lyndon is more doesn't realize he's unsatisfied and is more well, I'm just moving on with my life. No big deal. But he had plenty of opportunities to be happy. He joins the military. That's hard. Don't get me wrong. But he can fight for his country. He can find honor in it. Doesn't want that. He gets kidnapped into the Prussian military. Gets offered a good cushy job because he saved the general's life. Doesn't want that. Goes with the gambler. He's making a ton of money with the gambler. Doesn't want that. And he meets the random Dutch girl who's super hot and he sleeps with her after saying hi for no reason while the baby was watching. Really weird. Could have had a very nice settled down life with her. Doesn't want that. Has to move on. And so it's not this idea that he is Machiavellian and scheming, but it's this idea there's a hole in his heart that he is trying to fill and he can never be happy. At the end of the day, he was almost a lord, a duke. He went from nothing all the way to the top, and he still wasn't happy. And so it's a tragedy.
I would say that line about him giving up on love and seeking comfort for itself is representative of him giving up on those older ideas of honor and chivalry and principles in favor of a more materialistic existence due to the fact that he is so aimless and he doesn't know what he wants. And he is searching for everything to fill that void that's in his heart, and it just can't. But he's given up on the things that perhaps would have given him more meaning had he stayed true.
And I don't think the movie goes into great discretion, but I think a whole theme, which I do think, in my opinion, is the void in his heart. Fatherhood. Father figures. We open the movie, the dialogue of the movie and the scene opens with Barry Lyndon's father was killed in a duel when he was 14. And what does Barry do for the rest of the movie? He is continuously seeking out male approval, and he's continually chasing after women when other people maybe say he shouldn't. So there's this very clear authoritative figure line that he is looking for. He didn't have a dad to show him boundaries and to show that he was proud of him, and so he seeks it out. He has the friend in the army who is his father's friend who gets murdered. He then has the general in the Prussian army. He then has the gambler Irish friend. And so just continually he's looking for father figures over and over again, never finding it. And you know, I'm not trying to do a whole deep dive psychological on his character, but I do think that's why he was always pushing forward to something, because he didn't have a father to teach him how to be rooted. He was always trying to look to prove himself. And I think that's what he was searching for the whole time.
That's a very interesting perspective. I hadn't really thought about that take on fatherhood and how it was missing early on in his life and how it affected his decisions moving forward. But that makes a lot of sense, especially when you get to how he treats his own son, not his stepson, not his stepson. He treats him horribly.
No, not
but
Bollington.
The actual fruit of his loins, he treats very well. And the narrator even tells us whatever his faults were, which many people knew about, none could say that he was a bad father. None could say that he was not a tender father.
I love that line because, again, it reveals that even though Barry Lyndon isn't a good guy, he is a multifaceted 3D dimensional character who is trying to seek out a good life. He is trying to find some restoration for all of the havoc that he brought. And I like that. I like that he wasn't this miserable, greedy person through and through.
He just misses the mark so widely. Now, something else I'll say, too. Sure, he's aimless, he's greedy, he doesn't know what he wants, but he's very protective of the things he has. We see that also in other members of the nobility. And I think that that is another theme of this movie, that, you know, rich or poor, young or old, we're all more or less the same. And yet we pretend that we are more, right? So early on, when they're fighting that war, the narrator tells us, you know, the reasons for the war don't really matter so much as the people at the top wanted it to happen. And isn't it interesting that the people at the top are the ones hailed as mighty warriors and great heroes, whereas the cannon fodder are sent out to die and none remember their names?
I liked the take on this movie. It wasn't a social commentary on class. The Korean director's name, who did Parasite, who did Snowpiercer, Bong Ho, I'm mispronouncing, but a lot of his work is very, very clearly commentary on the social division politically and economically. There wasn't none of any of that in this movie, but I liked what it was more saying was, no matter how rich the rich are, no matter how poor the poor are, no matter who's fighting to get to the top, yada, yada, we all die the same. I mean, that's what the final epilogue, the very end of the movie had an epilogue title card, where it wasn't a visual epilogue, it was just a title card. And it just said simply like, this happened in the year Lord of like George the second or third, and this character fought during this time period, but ultimately, like everyone else, whether it's wealth, status, or marital or whatever, all ended evenly with death. And so I like this idea of like, not the frugality of it all, like, oh, it's nihilistic, there's no point, but more like, can't we come together and be happy with where you are? Like, I like that. It was always a talk about money. At the very beginning, Barry's original family, his uncle, they were talking about like, oh, if my daughter Nora, his cousin who he's in love with, marries this general, we'll get 1,500 francs or whatever a year and we'll be better off. So there was a discussion of like money and like social commentary, but ultimately I feel more like the people who are rich were far more depressed than the poor people. Like I never saw a true example of like, look at the poor and their squandering and their filth and the rich and their like beautiful luxury. It's more like, I don't know, the rich are just as depressed as maybe the poor are, and the death is like the great equalizer. So why don't we all just kind of enjoy where we are born, whether it's rich, poor, in the middle, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that a big part of this movie is the fact that Barry Lyndon comes from not necessarily a poor family, but a family that is pretty unremarkable. And yet he's a con man, and he's able to work himself, I guess he falls into the lap of luxury, into a place of power and position and status. And then all of the people around him are also con men. We've got con men at the top, we've got con men at the bottom, we've got con men in the middle, yet they're all con men. I think that the ending of this movie is kind of bittersweet. It's not purely positive, it's not purely negative, but I think there is an undertone of pessimism, not pure pessimism, that states that so often we are slaves to our circumstances. And the opportunities that arise to us, we will go through the doors that are open to us. And not everyone will go down the path of least resistance as Barry did. But at the end of the day, life happens. And we make do with it. And we can be active participants in how our fate plays out. But at the same time, we're also very passive, and perhaps more passive than we would like to admit. And at the end of the day, yes, all of our fate is the same. We're all going to be 6 feet under, or cremated, or thrown off of a cliff.
And I find this movie to be very ironic, because the normal story, when the end story is death is the great equalizer, usually it's a story of a very greedy person fighting and fighting and fighting. I think of, maybe this isn't the best example, but immediately in watching this movie, I was reminded of The Great Gatsby. And how the guy who threw all the parties kind of came, if I remember, I have not read the book, I've only seen the movie once, if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't it that he came from a pretty poor family and he kind of schmoozed, lied, and got his way to the top and then ends up being shot? So kind of the idea of like, no matter how hard you work, it's all for naught. But
from what I know about The Great Gatsby, due to cultural osmosis, seeing people reference it online, that seems accurate, but I have neither seen the movie nor read the book.
Okay.
So.
Well, that'll be another good one for the podcast. I love Leonardo DiCaprio, so I'd love to watch the movie. But what I'm saying is, why I think it's ironic is usually you do have that greedy, conniving person who cuts down, stab people in the back to get to the top, and then it's pulled out from under them. But this movie is, here's this dude that just bumbles into great fortune, fumbles his way into beautiful women's laps. And even that was all taken away. So I do think it's this juxtaposition with the message and our main character used as a plot device with his passiveness. And so I thought that was really interesting.
A nice foil, a fantastic foil for Barry Lyndon is Lord Bullingdon, I believe. Because Lord Bullingdon is not taking the path of least resistance. He's very different from Barry Lyndon, in that Barry Lyndon has a natural charm to him. He has things that he's good at. Bullingdon doesn't seem particularly good at anything. And he's nervous, like he's skittish, he doesn't have that charm, he throws up at the duel, but he carries on anyway. He pushes through those doors that are a bit hard to budge through. And even when he's a kid, rather than playing it cool, playing it safe with his stepfather and respecting his wishes, he is actively pushing back. Whereas we have never seen Redmond Barry push back on any authority figure.
Yeah, it almost feels ever so slightly the other themes you see in movies, natural talent versus hard work. You know, where Barry Lyndon has this weird charismatic that just gets some places, but then Bullingdon has to suffer with every single fiber in his body to get anywhere.
Yeah. But he's acting from principle, whereas Barry Lyndon is acting based off of pure self-interest and the closest shiny object he can get his hands on.
Would you mind, Jeffrey, giving a little bit of context who Bullingdon is for the audience who maybe hasn't watched the movie yet?
Absolutely. So, Redmond Barry marries Lady Lyndon. Lady Lyndon already has a son from the old count who has passed away. And, you know, she's a widower, but Barry comes into the picture. This child does not like Barry Lyndon because this child is very clever, very bookish. He sees Barry for who he is, and he is a scoundrel who does not properly love his mom as he feels he ought. And so he makes that known throughout the film. He never calls him Barry Lyndon. He never calls him father. Or maybe he does, but if he does, it's ironic. But whenever he refers to his father, his stepfather, by name, he calls him Redmond Barry, telling him essentially, you might carry the fancy title, but you are still the same man. You are still of low birth. You are still a scoundrel, a gambler, a rake. That's a fun old term that essentially means the same thing as scoundrel and ne'er-do-well and ragamuffin and rascal, rapscallion.
Those are all good words. The only one I think of is marauder, which isn't quite in the same vein.
Yeah, marauder has more violent connotations.
How about
whereas,
scallywag?
All of those other ones. Scallywag is good. What are the connotations of scallywag?
I guess a pirate. I just think of pirates.
Pirates call people scallywags. That's for sure. They must be scallywags as well. Do you think it's like landlubber, though? It implies, oh, those people aren't good on sea.
You know, I do not know the terminology of where scallywag came from.
Oh, but those are some cool boats, though. Ships. Ships is the proper term. Early on in the film, we see them sailing across the water.
Oh,
I wonder how much
yeah.
it costs to just have those for those, like, what, 2-3 shots?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fact that this movie was only made on 12 million, obviously you have to adjust it for today's money, but still, I feel like that's pretty impressive for what they pulled off. This really was a spectacular movie.
And the locations that they managed to pull?
But sorry, I didn't mean to distract you from Bullington.
Yeah, Bullingdon, Lord Bullingdon, is the son of Lady Lyndon. And he makes it very clear that he is not going to just stand idly by as this man ruins their life. And of course, Barry hates this, right? This kid sees him for who he is and is not giving him the respect that he feels that he deserves. And so they have a very hostile relationship until eventually he is tossed out of the house in a very public spat that really ruins the reputation that Barry Lyndon has not really been working hard for, but certainly working. He's been scheming for it.
And well, another thing about, again, his non doing anything, just like being so laid back. I mean, ultimately, he married Mrs. Lyndon. I'm not going to say everything was perfect. He was a cheater. He was not a good person. Didn't have a good relationship with his stepson. But, like, he made it. He could have been content. But it was his mother, his Irish mother, that came and whispered lies into his ears, saying, hey, your stepson hates you. If your wife dies, it's all going to the stepson because he is in the will. You're not. You need to go conniving and figure out how to become a lord. Having a title is the only way. So you could argue that he would have just been like, because also I think in the film, which I do want to talk about, like he married Mrs. Lyndon and then proceeds to have a bunch of orgies and have a bunch of sex with other women, but then just random, it's not random. He basically gets caught in the act of it, which I think kind of fills him with shame. And so we just have a scene where he goes to his wife while she's in the bathtub and he just says, sorry, which, you know, arguably like you could enjoy the subtext and not having to get fully into it. But basically you just, from that point on, like, oh, okay, like he's not a cheater, which I guess is good. Maybe at the bare minimum, they're not showing it anymore. I just thought that was kind of I thought that was just very fast. And maybe I should have gotten it by this point. Cause like we've talked, you know, it's a 3-hour long movie. At this point, we're an hour and a half into the movie. We know that Barry Lyndon is an opportunist. He takes the path of least resistance and he satisfies his carnal cravings is kind of what he wants. But I was a little surprised that he was a cheater. Now, granted, he was willing to kill a man at the beginning of the movie to sleep with his cousin, and then he slept with the Dutch woman who had a husband holding her baby. So maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. But after he got married to like Miss Lyndon, I was like, okay, he got it. He got the rich hot woman who has lots of money. Immediately cut to orgy. And I'm like, oh, I was not expecting that of his character. But again, I probably should have, because I think they set it up that he's very much an opportunistic and enjoys the fleshly cravings.
Yeah, and especially since he states very clearly, or the narrator states, that he had no real love for Lady Lyndon, which, what a shame. What a shame. She seemed like such a nice lady. and also very beautiful, very beautiful. Kind of makes you hate Barry all the more for not appreciating what he has.
Yeah. Fun fact about the actress who played Mrs. Lyndon. Stanley Kubrick was very paranoid of people finding out about the project, and he didn't want the tabloids or anyone knowing. And so the actress who played her, like, didn't really know a lot about the movie. But Kubrick told her basically like, hey, you'll just be on set. It'll be fine. She was more a model than anything, but he told her, don't go into the sun for like the next 6 months. I want you to show up to set pale, which worked, because that time period, they were more pale and everyone painted their face with makeup to be more white because I guess that's what was considered more beautiful. But
I did take note of that she didn't really have many speaking lines. And I was wondering like how intentional that was, that we didn't really get to hear her voice or her perspective in this. Granted, this is a story about Barry Lyndon. It's a very male-dominated world, but it's interesting, and it's tragic.
I think it was a smart decision. I assume.
I think so too.
Kubrick was going with the idea of like, yeah, these women were seen, not heard. And by not giving us her perspective, I think it makes her even more of a tragic character because the bit we do get from her is more of the narrator and Bullington, the son, standing up for her. And we get she is a kind-hearted woman. She is like a very emotional, like more in her own mind. But you could she seems like if she was loved well, she could have thrived. But she was never loved well. She married very young to an old, grumpy wheelchair man. And then she marries Barry Lyndon, who was not a good husband.
Yeah. The way I think that actress did a great job with what little was given to her, you really get the sense that she is fighting demons throughout.
No, I agree. I really did enjoy her performance. Just the shot of her in the bath, a very painterly shot, but really not just by the composition, but because of her just devoid of any emotion. I think it went from the orgy scene of Barry Lyndon cheating to her in a bathtub. And I thought she had killed herself. Like I thought
that she was dead as well.
Yeah, slowly pulling out on her. She's in this like brass bathtub, has like a little bit of shawl over her, so she's not like completely nude, but like very naked, and she looks lifeless. And so
the thing that really got me to hate Barry Lyndon was when he was gradually plucking the people out of her life that were her lifeline, like her son Bullington, but then the chaplain that would wait on her and read scripture to her. And that was a source of comfort for her, the devotion that she was pouring herself into after the death of their son. And now she's deprived of everyone but Barry. And Barry is the last person she needs.
I will say, though, again, it almost makes the mother more hateable. Because, again, the mother's the one that originally is like, this isn't good enough. They're going to, once she dies, they're going to take everything from you. You can't even trust her. So she's kind of like the serpent poisoning Barry. But in that scene you're talking about, at that point, their son had died. Their youngest son had died. And Barry was, sad and depressed and an alcoholic. And it was Barry's mother that told the chaplain, the priest, hey, you're fired. And it made me hate her because it just reminded me of, like, again, Barry Lyndon is an adult man, grown-ass man. He can make his own decisions. But also he's kind of this weird adult child that I don't want to say he's being manipulated by others because he's not. He has his own autonomy. But it makes you hate the mom because the mom is very active. She is not in this movie very much, but she is an active force, and therefore she's so easy to hate.
She is very Machiavellian. She has some of the wits that Barry lacks. You get the sense that perhaps if circumstances were different, if she were Barry, if she had a male's body and had more ability to maneuver socially, maybe they would have gotten the things that they ultimately wanted. But, no, we're stuck with Barry. And I think that it does make Barry more hateable. The fact that he is being such a man-child and is delegating all of these important matters to his mother. He's just letting this happen. She's the one managing his estate, really, while he wastes away with his liquor and his gambling.
It is true that ultimately it is his decision to let his mom rule everything. But I think it is because she feels so Machiavellian, you almost don't think it's Barry's fault. But at the end of the day, he is like, I don't want to say a baby whining. His son did just die. But it is still his responsibility to step up to the plate and make sure his estate is running well. And he's not. He's letting it fall into the hands of a snake, which he should have stood up to earlier on.
Yeah, it just feels that he's incapable of providing pushback. And it's not from a place of fear, it's from a place of a lack of principles, a lack of purpose. If his mom had pitched the idea to him before executing the decision to get rid of the chaplain, I think that he would have been, yeah, okay, let's do it. Sure, fine. No resistance whatsoever.
I think at the end of the day, Barry Lyndon is a cautionary tale of what happens when you just go through life going through the motions. Like, people talk about it all the time. You have a midlife crisis. You wake up in your 40s and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm married to this person whom I don't love. I'm in this job that I hate, in this career. And it so happens like when people get divorces, when people just like make crazy life decisions, I think, things out of your control happen, and that's totally understandable. But I think it's a cautionary tale of like, if you just don't say yes or no to something in life, your answer's already made. Just because you don't make an answer, that's still an answer in itself. And you're going to end up somewhere completely contrived that doesn't matter, and you're going to hate yourself for it. And honestly, even after Barry loses the duel to Bullington and has his leg blown off and loses his riches and gets kicked out of the country of England, you feel like he's the same level of content that he was when he had everything, because he's just a character of lackluster. He doesn't have anything because he didn't strive to get any of it. I would say the only thing in the movie that he personally made and nourished was his son. And so sure, he lost that, but like, I felt like, yeah, he might as well be without a leg, banished from a country, penniless, than a rich noble in like a prospering country. Like, it felt the same because he felt so not disinterested, but probably deep down unsatisfied, but was so pathetic he couldn't do anything to make a difference.
Yeah, compare that again to Lord Bullingdon, who knows what he's fighting for. He's fighting for his estate, his family name, his mom, and he is providing that pushback, and he is saying yes to hard decisions. During the duel, he throws up when it's Barry's turn to shoot. And Barry, seeing him in a state of anxiety, and I'd say commendably, he shoots the ground next to him rather than pointing it at Bullingdon. And he gives them that opportunity to walk away. But Bullingdon doesn't take that opportunity. He says yes to danger once more. Yeah, and we know how it affects him because we've just seen it. Guy's puking his guts out.
I mean, something that I really like about that scene that you're talking about, Jeffrey, to go to this point of Bullingdon is, what do they call the two people? Like you have your right-hand man for each person. So there's like two people watching, kind of officiating the duel. And when Barry shoots the ground, the officials are like, Sir Bullingdon, are you satisfied? And Bullington's character struggles to say it, but he says, no, I am not satisfied. And you're so proud in that moment, because for a half second you're like, oh, come on, he fired into the ground, just let it go. He's satisfied. He reclaimed the respect that he disrespected you for. But then you think about it, like, no, Barry has been a horrible person and destroyed Bullington's life thoroughly. It is courageous of him to continue going forward with this duel. So he's such a great actor in that moment as he struggles to say, no, I am not satisfied. I'm going to keep going. And something that I wanted to talk about also with Bullington's character is I loved Kubrick's decision. Kubrick? Is that how you say it?
I've always said Kubrick.
Kubrick. Something else when it comes to Bullington's character that I really loved. I want to know if it was Kubrick that adapted it differently or if this was in the original book. But when we first meet Lord Bullington, he's like, I don't know, 8, 10, 12. He's young. And this man is a steadfast, courageous, brave kid. Like once Barry comes into the picture, he's taking no sass. He is back talking, and not back talking like a kid. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. He is educated. He's saying things with grace, with great precision. And it's very fun to watch him as a 12-year-old cognitively know, hey, Barry, you're a snake. You're treating my mother poorly. I don't like what you're doing to the family, to my title, to my fortune. Not because I'm entitled and rich, but because I know that it is important as a family to keep wealth and to respect it. And so I love that you get that he is almost like this mini adult kid that you respect, who is strong and brave. But then cut to the future, and my wife and I both you have like maybe 5 minutes of scenery with young Bullington, and then we flash forward like 8 years, and he's like, I don't know, 16, 17, 18, and you don't even need him to say anything. You get this shot of Bullington laying in the grass against his mother's leg, and the narrator kind of says, and Bullington became like a mama's girl, but he looks like a coward. He looks pathetic. It looks like he would still nurse off his mom if he was allowed to. But I love that. At first I was like, no, young Bullington was this Chad amongst Chad as a 12-year-old. But I like, because I think it insinuates, up until this point, Bullington had a healthy upbringing, and he was this awesome kid. And then once Barry came into the picture, Bullington became a worse person for it. He was completely always being undermined. He was in constant fear. And so instead of growing up as a Chad as he should have been, he turns into this feeble, sissy guy. But in his feebleness, he still, like Jeffrey said, chooses to do the right thing and chooses, like, again, if he'd grown up to be this badass general in the military Chad, it would have been no big deal. He would have overthrown Barry a long time ago. But the fact that he was this sissy character, the fact that he was able to stand up against the man that made him kind of into a sissy, makes his arc so much more compelling. So I love that whoever did that, whether it was the author of the book or Stanley Kubrick.
Such a layered and interesting relationship that they have with each other. And the decisions that Kubrick makes to create these three-dimensional characters that aren't entirely good, aren't entirely bad. You kind of know where they're coming from and why they're doing the things that they're doing. It's so impressive to me. I know Barry and I know Bullington, and this story couldn't have gone any other way.
It's amazing because ultimately we're watching so many characters have a worse life because of the indecision of Barry. For Barry being such a unmotivated character who does nothing, everyone around him it's almost like everyone is reacting to his nothingness that drives the story. You know, you think if someone sits in a room and does nothing with their whole life, no one around them is like reacting to it. But somehow Barry's inability to make any decisions creates an upheaval in everyone's lives. And now we have to watch these characters come to terms with it and face it, you know. Bullington becoming this pathetic guy, Mrs. Lyndon becoming a depressed woman. And so all these people having to overcome Barry's nonplusness, which is just so weird to think that his non-action causes so many other characters' action.
Yeah, it makes me think of that Freudian theory. I don't know what each category means. You know, the id, the ego, the superego. One represents the primal instinct, the animal urges, and then the other represents the rational part of you that holds the reins and directs the rest of you. Ryan Tatum's character, Barry Lyndon, represents the primal instinct-driven man. And then Bullington is the one that is governed more by reason and principle over and against his animal instincts, which would have him flee. And there's even an acknowledgement that he has fled for too long, right? For it to have gotten to this point where his mother has tried to commit suicide. He admits to his compatriots, listen, I am a man despised, and rightfully so, because I have done nothing as this man has brought our house to ruin. But I'm going to rectify that now.
Yeah, it's three-dimensional characters. They have flaws, but they also have triumphs. Yeah, good job with adaptation.
Well, with that being said, actually, before we go on to our holy moments, I just want to talk about the cinematography one more time. Was there a shot that sticks with you still?
Yeah,
There's so many shots like that for me.
Yeah. I loved all of the wide shots. Specifically, I just love the scenery of this movie. I loved the sweeping fields. I really love that early on wide shot where when Barry Lyndon was a very young kid and him and his cousin went to like watch the army do their performative marching. And then it turned into that fun dance. And there was a really wide shot of the military marching in like a golden field that I loved. And then the very following scene, Nora, his cousin, who he wanted to shaboinky, is walking in this like grove on a pathway with a wide shot with the grove. That was really beautiful. But I think hands down, my favorite shot in the entire movie, which I think was one of those shots that was kind of really inspired by a painting after Barry's son dies because he got on a horse and the horse trampled him. He is an alcoholic. He is depressed. He goes to like, I don't know, like restaurant slash for gentlemen library smoking hangout rooms that you see like in these movies of this time period. And it's when Bullington is going to go tell him, I want to duel him. So Bullington's looking for him and he goes up into like the top room and Barry is sitting in a very, very low chair, a very comfy looking chair. And he's facing a window and then there's 5 men around him placed beautifully, all so exhausted and depressed. They're all probably out on late night bingers, drunk alcoholics whose wives have kicked them out of the house because they're pissed off at them. That's the vibe you get from all of them. And it is the most painterly looking shot, in my opinion, of the entire film because of the composition of how the men are sitting. And that's a wide shot. And they cut to kind of a medium shot of Bullington looking at Barry on the ground. And in the background, you see all 5 men closer. And they did blink. But I watched, and it was very infrequent. It was very clear that they were probably directed to make as little movement as possible, which was not uncanny, but unrealistic. But it worked for this painterly-like film. So that was probably my favorite shot, I would say.
And there are plenty of shots like that where the people, the characters in the scene, are arranged in such a way that the audience can see everything that's happening, everything that they're doing. But they're not arranged in ways that people would naturally arrange themselves. And that's because it is composed as a painting. It's like the famous painting of the Last Supper, where all of Christ's disciples are on one side of the table, conveniently facing the audience, and not sitting around the table as they typically would be. It's an intentional artistic decision that doesn't quite reflect reality as much, but it does reflect a certain aesthetic intention.
Yes. And there's definitely a through line. Like I said, every single shot is beautiful. So there's a through line of enough that it doesn't feel like it's messing with the story. I think with a lesser director, they could have a shot or 2 or 3 that like, this is the shot. And they really focus on it. And it's more jarring than anything because the rest of the movie doesn't hold up to it. Or at least there's not a continuity through the cinematography throughout the film. But there was very much a continuity with this cinematography.
Every shot, every moment was intentional, right? And it's not that, because I know that you were once told by a senior when we were in film school about how a lot of amateurs, right, they breeze through certain shots that they don't care about, and then they get to this one shot that they're staking their entire film on. But you should have that level of care, that level of passion throughout. And this movie shows that to a T, what that looks like if you put that into practice. And actually, I'll invite you to tell that story if you feel compelled to.
I'd love to. Yeah. It's one of those stories. Like, I don't know, if you go to like film school or if you learn anything, there's always these stories that stick out and you're like, this is going to impact me in my career. And this is one of them. I was a freshman. He was a senior, and I was trying to figure out how to pull off a shot technically. And that was my question to him. I was like, hey, I'm trying to do it was inspired by the first, I think, Sherlock Holmes movie, where there's a shot where Sherlock Holmes throws up an apple and then you have the camera as a God shot. And this is also the shot that started my infamy in film school, where everyone's like, Nathaniel's just obsessed with the God shot, where the camera's high up looking down on the scene. And it's probably true. But Sherlock Holmes throws up the apple and it cuts the God shot and the apple goes up to the camera and then goes into slow motion. And then once it hits the peak at the top and then falls down, it goes back into fast, normal 24 frames per second. And so I was trying to figure out how to pull that off. I wanted to replicate the shot. So I went to the senior. I asked him. He gave me his opinion on how to pull it off technically. But then he just asked me, he was like, hey, that's a cool shot. Tell me about any other shots. And, I couldn't. There really wasn't anything else at that point in my brain hole of like what I was thinking about shooting. And he told me he's like, hey, not every shot in a film has to be the shot you use in a trailer. You know, if you're gonna make a trailer, you want to use the most beautiful, exciting, picturesque shots to get people interested. Not like you don't need that. Now, maybe with Barry Lyndon, you can. Every shot is dead gorgeous. But for most movies, you don't need that, and you can't do it with your budget and your time. So he wasn't telling me, make every shot a technical masterpiece. Every time the camera has to move and be super crazy and super technical. He wasn't saying that. He simply was saying, like, every shot in film serves its purpose. It doesn't matter if it's a medium shot of just someone sitting at a table talking, or if it's a really crazy, intricate, Steven Spielberg oneer with the camera moving all over the place. But you have to care about it because that shot is conveying the story. And if you don't care about the shot, you don't care about that bit of the story. And if you don't care about that bit of the story, it sure as heck shouldn't be in your movie. And so that was kind of his piece of advice. Don't make every single shot super exciting, but care about every shot, because every shot makes up the entirety of your film. So don't just care about certain aspects of your film, but all of it.
It's a great piece of advice. I mean, if that had happened to me, that would be a formative moment as well.
Yeah. Great guy, Tim. He was super, super, super sweet. Yeah. But also another shot I wanted to mention was, because it's on my mind, but also it really was one of my favorites. Again, the shot of Miss Lyndon, who was so depressed. We cut to her close up of her face, and it's pale white, and we pull out. And again, maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if you think I'm wrong. Was there camera movement? Of course, absolutely. There wasn't a crazy amount of camera movement. There was a lot of static shots or, very subtle camera movement. And again, I think that was lending to the painterliness of this beautiful movie. We don't want to move the camera because we want it to feel like this grand, beautiful painting. But this shot had a lot of, I remember because it was not jarring, but it was provocative with how much movement it was. Starts with a close-up on her face, and we really pull out, and we see the entirety of the room, her in this bathtub, and it was very emotional, the shot, because of the camera movement and the composition.
Yeah, and this movie, a lot of it is static to give it that painterly look, but when it moves actors in the scene, it moves them very well. The blocking, gorgeous. And one moment that combines good character movement with good camera movement is closer to the beginning. We're in the middle of a battle between the Redcoats and the French, I believe. And the camera is moving alongside several trees, and the Redcoats are moving just beyond the trees, a little faster than the camera. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes, I remember that whole sequence because the battle was so bizarre. And if anything, it just made me question, is this how wars were fought back in the day? Because it was literally an open field, and it was, I don't know, maybe 150, 200 Redcoats walking to 100, 200 French. And they just walked and got shot at over and over again. And more Redcoats just kept dying until they finally got close enough they could do melee attack. And I was like, gosh, surely there has to be a more effective way of fighting. But how they filmed it, even though kind of frustrating in the sense of you guys seemed stupid, but again, this was the wartime. This was the technology they had at hand. It was moving in the sense of frustration of the fight, which I think they did on purpose and did well.
No, then those were how battles were fought back then. There were certain rules of engagement where both parties would agree, we're going to meet on this battlefield, we're going to just kind of walk towards each other, and we're going to shoot. And this is at a time period when musket fire, guns, weren't as reliable as they are now, right? So if I point a gun at you and I shoot you, it's not a guaranteed hit. But it's still incredibly dangerous, of course. So if you're going to join the military and you're not an officer, yeah, things are going to look pretty tough for you, and you probably aren't going to live very long. That's why the American Revolution was such an upset, is because the British were following these established rules of engagement, whereas the American soldiers were practicing guerrilla warfare, ambushing from the trees, engaging unconventionally with the enemy.
Yeah, I'll tell you. You saying that reminded me, you want to know what 50% of my brain was thinking during this movie?
What?
It was, man, I need to re-listen/watch Hamilton. It's been so long. But I never heard or talked about or in media about duels until I listen to Hamilton. And so just so many things about this movie just made me think of Hamilton. I was like, man, I love Hamilton. I need to re-listen to that. I haven't listened to that
It's great.
since like college.
It is iconic.
Yeah. Something, I know we're talking about the cinematography, but something I want to go back to really quick because it's a scene in the war time when he was in the army. Another moment of he doesn't make decisions, people make decisions for him, but then he has luck and just things work out for him. When he first joins the army and the really big, tall, brutish dude makes fun of him. And everyone in the military is like, oh, stupid Barry Lyndon, you're so dumb. And he was just going to take it. He was going, oh, okay, well, whatever. I'm going to go back to my life. But then the dude sitting right next to him, clearly not a fan of the really big dude that pissed off Barry Lyndon, uses Barry Lyndon as a tool. He whispers to him like, hey, you should say this. Hey, you should say this. So again, if it wasn't for this guy enacting his will on Barry Lyndon would have just taken it and would have been like, whatever. But it's someone else who influences Barry Lyndon, and then Barry Lyndon does that. But then the next scene, Barry gets into a fight, like a skirmish with the really big brute, but he comes up on top because he's charismatic, because he's lucky, because he's just good at things. And so it's just another example of someone else pushing Barry Lyndon in a certain direction, but then Barry's God-given talents just work out for him.
Definitely makes me think he's the perfect goon, right? Because he is not quite a hulking body, but he's just very good at executing things and very good at taking directions.
Yeah, for sure. It's what everyone wants and their military people. Go be charismatic and seduce the enemies with your lovely eyes. But I interrupted you. What are some of your favorite shots in the film?
Well, perhaps one of them's the one that I just mentioned about the soldiers marching past the trees, which are in the foreground. Foreground's the thing that's closest to us. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
The scenes that you mentioned, fantastic. I was awestruck by the bathtub scene. But there is a shot of Redmond Barry. He is riding away on his horse, and the sky looks absolutely golden. It's covered in cloud, and there's a yellow halo surrounding the cloud from the sunlight. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
No. Is this when he was pretending to be a messenger in the army, riding around on the horse?
It might have been that. But it was so picture perfect, and it clearly wasn't a matte painting, and they didn't have the tech for CGI, and so you know that they just caught that day when it was perfect. It's one of the beauties of filmmaking. Some days you just run into a shot that you couldn't have made any other day, and it makes the film all that better for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason, movie magic. Sometimes, I mean, a movie's all about planning, but sometimes things just fall into place and you get the shot. I remember another small story that happened with my senior short film. I am notorious for shot listing, storyboarding, and making sure I know every single detail before I go onto a film set. But we just so happened to be filming the climax, and it was like 5 a.m. and it was really cold in like February, and the actor was breathing, and we all kind of just noticed it was a really aggressive breath, like when you breathe in the cold and you can see the vapor. And so we just happened to be shooting in a warehouse where we could film a frame within a frame. So we filmed through this like brick window, and we were able to capture him silhouette and the vapor coming out of his mouth. And it wasn't because I thought of it, or it wasn't this creative moment that I had. It was just, we saw it, and it was just, the moment was magical, and we knew, quick, get the camera. We need to film that.
By the way, you should send me that short film again. I want to watch it.
Yeah. We need, me and my producer need to sit down and relook into film festivals. It was a lot of fun making that guy.
Well, with that being said, folks, I think we've come to the end of today's podcast. First official episode of Season 4, is that right?
Season 5.
Season 5.
Yeah.
The last episode was a real episode, but this is the first one where we're picking a category.
Yeah. Yep.
So, do you have a holy moment, Nathaniel?
Man, I feel like I have a few, but I think for me, it probably is going to be Bullington standing up to Barry in the duel. There's a lot of things I love, but I think because we watch 3 hours of this movie, this character being so inactive, when we get Bullington, he is a breath of fresh air. while his acting is, very scattered and scared and sissy, he's not brave. He's brave, but he's not like charismatic. He's not your normal bravery. But the fact that he's taking action is so refreshing to watching Barry that I was so engrossed in that scene. And also, I think that is a masterpiece of a scene. It's pretty long. I don't know, like 10, 15, 20 minutes. And it's just a duel. It's a pretty quick duel. But the subtext going on in it, the payoffs, the changes of power dynamics in that scene, I think really is clearly shot by a master. And so I think just that climactic scene of the duel and all the themes and all the payoffs make that my holy moment.
No, I will say that I think this movie makes great use of silence and the mundane moments immediately before, during, and after an important moment to create tension. And that scene does it perfectly. In fact, you stole the words right out of my mouth. That was going to be my holy moment.
Oh, really?
And it still is my holy moment. Just the contrast between the two characters, how they complement and contrast each other. The foil that Bullingdon is for Barry Lyndon. We've got the rogue charmer who can't stand on any firm ground because he is not acting from a place of principle. He's acting from a place of aimless self-interest. And then Bullingdon, who is not naturally gifted in any respect, save for he seems to be a very intelligent kid, but he's still willing to persevere and push through hardship in order to achieve the things that he wants. And what he wants is more meaningful than what Barry Lyndon wants.
I mean, it's just a great scene. For a 3-hour-long movie with a lot of great scenes, that one really, in my opinion, is just hands down the best. Besides that, I think some of the scenes, honestly, I would keep wanting to say the queen, but she's not a queen, Mrs. Lyndon, I just really enjoyed her acting. Just her absolute lack of a will to live, quite literally, as she tries to take her life later on. Also, the casting of whoever played the priest, his physical look was immaculate.
I thought that too. He looked the part very well, so distinctive, plucked straight from the 1700s. But I also really liked his character, as small a role as it was. He was principled. You would get the sense that from his look, that he'd be a very stuffy individual, a strict taskmaster to the students, easily annoyed. But he seems genuinely principled. He genuinely cares for Bullingdon and for the mother. And he seems genuinely kind. Early on, he's encouraging Bullingdon to give his new stepfather the benefit of the doubt. So I really liked them. I really liked all the characters in this movie.
Yeah, I do think the characterizations of all our characters were great. Again, he was just the priest, another small role, but another 3-dimensional character that felt real. I did enjoy him.
I'm going to give this movie, I'm going to give it a 4.5. Oftentimes, there are movies that I go into really wanting to like. Oftentimes, those movies disappoint me because I've set my expectations so high, too high. I was worried this would be one of those movies. I've wanted to watch it for so long, but thankfully, it executed on all cylinders. It fired on all cylinders, excuse me. And it also wasn't nearly as graphic as I was expecting. I knew this was an R-rated film. I knew it had some nudity, but I was expecting it to really get depraved. And I mean, this is one that honestly, I think I could watch with my teenage child, right? So parental guidance, but I wouldn't be too scandalized by like watching this with my son or daughter at a certain age.
Yeah. It's funny, when you say rated R, do you know that for a fact?
Actually, I don't know.
Because
I knew that there was nudity involved. I think it might be PG.
It is PG. The reason I say that is because I didn't know about this until we watched Kramer versus Kramer way back in I don't even think we released the episode. I think it was like trial edits when we were first coming up with the podcast. Great movie. We should actually release the episode or redo it for the podcast. But we learned this in film school. I completely forgot the rating system, like PG, PG-13, PG, and R, didn't come about until a certain time frame, which I think was late 70s, maybe 80s. Which meant PG, I think, was the highest rating for a while. And so when we watched Kramer vs. Kramer, it's all PG. I wasn't expecting full frontal, female nudity in it. And so I have learned since then, we watched quite a few PG, or We've watched quite a few movies from like the 70s and before, and anytime I see PG, I'm like, oh, there's going to be nudity somewhere. And this wasn't an exclusion. When the movie started, I saw PG and I was like, 1970s, I bet there's going to be something. But I will say, a majority of the film, there was nothing crass. So I was really surprised when they had that like short kind of orgy scene. Just because like there was not really any other sexual stuff, very heavily implied, very heavily, but not like grotesquely shown.
Interestingly enough, I think that was a tasteful use of nudity. Because I feel like the point was not to sexualize the woman so much as showcase Barry Lyndon as the depraved man he was.
Yeah.
It didn't feel objectifying. It felt purposeful.
I would agree. I would agree. I think there's way worse sex scenes out there. I do think it had a purpose. And again, like we said, it was used so infrequently. So when it was used, it made a statement. It had a purpose behind it. It was motivated, characterly motivated. So I think it made sense. Just a small thing, which is kind of weird. So another weird thing I liked about that scene was obviously when you think of men cheating on their wives, you don't think of like loving and tender and it being romantic. But the way Barry Lyndon was interacting with these women sexually was almost like it was carnal. It wasn't like a sexual thing. It was like he needed to be filled. As soon as he got a wife, again, it wasn't good enough. He needed more. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to have this beautiful affair. He was laid out lavishly with nude women around him. And he wasn't just like kissing them. He was almost like devouring them in this weird, greedy sense. So again, while I'm not the biggest fan of those scenes, I do think that Kubrick did a really good job of doing everything he could to get the most out of the sex he could, rather than it being like, and now he's having sex, here you go. So I do think the scene was well done. For me, I will say I'm only giving this a 3.3. Maybe that's a lot lower than you're expecting. And I was very I'm not fond of the movie. I did enjoy the movie. It was fun watching a Kubrick film. As I said, I haven't seen one all the way through. I was impressed with the storytelling. Like, it genuinely was impressive. Like when we were going through it, I was like, what is this movie? This is a weird movie. I don't understand what we're doing. By the time we got to the end of it, I was like, okay, I really do think this was a masterfully woven together film. I didn't get anything emotionally out of it. And for me, that's a pretty important thing for a movie. I want to be moved to some degree. And while I think there was a lesson, and while I do think there were morals, and while I do think the story was interesting, I just wasn't moved by anything. And so I think that's the reason it is knocked down for me personally.
That's fair. That's super fair. And, we live for these moments. That's why we have a podcast with two hosts, is so that we can disagree and have different opinions and different takes. So
truly a beautiful movie. It really was gorgeous. And if anything, I would describe this movie to people as interesting. Which is a crazy thing to say because of kind of how boring it is at some points, because Barry doesn't do anything. But I was always interested. I was always curious what was going to happen next because of the setup of Barry being such a unmotivated protagonist. I was like, where are we going? So I was interested.
Yeah, the things happening around him are very interesting. And the circumstances he finds himself pushed towards are very compelling in their own right. And I think due to the grandness of the movie, its scale, and the level of spectacle, that also was able to keep you engaged throughout.
Yeah, they did a very good job. I would say that's the perfect way. Even though I was never invested, I was always interested in what was happening.
Well, with that being said, Nathaniel, I think it's your time to spin that wheel, see what movie we're watching next week.
Yeah, it's my first movie pick of the year. So I'll really quick just go through my categories, guys, or my movies for the categories. I have No Country for Old Men, which is my personal pick, my wild card. Wanted to watch this movie for a really long time. But I'm a Cheerleader, which is, of course, Vegas' pick. What would it be else for? Sing It in the Rain, which is one of my best friend's favorite movies of all time. I think it's her favorite movie, and it's for the category of musical. Sent in by my best friend, Paul. Thank you, Paul, for the suggestion. We got Godzilla vs. Biolente, which is Jeffrey's old roommate, Maximus, who also sent in that category, Godzilla. So thank you, Maximus. And Marriage Story. Marriage Story is my category pick. My category has been on our Letterboxd forever. So I have like over 600 movies on my Letterboxd to watch, but this is one of like the first 10 I've ever added. So been on there forever. And last but not least, this category, 70s, Jeffrey picked Barry Lyndon, and I picked Days of Heaven. I think it would be fun to get Days of Heaven because 3 reasons actually. One, Jeffrey and I watched this together for the first time in college in my dorm. Really great memory. 2, same category, the 70s would be fun to do back to back. And 3, in my opinion, Days of Heaven has the best cinematography I've ever seen. It has my favorite shot in all of film history. So I think it would be a great comparison cinematography, the 2 back to back, kind of seeing which ones we think are better. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and spin my wheel. All right, it is landing on, not that one, not that. Oh, okay. I didn't want it to be No Country for Old Men just because I have a lot of work to do this week, and that seems like a very heavy movie. But next week we are watching But I'm a Cheerleader for Vegas pick.
Oh.
The only kind of funny comedy we're watching this season, besides Vegas pick for Jeffrey. But we'll find that out when we get there. Sweet. So yeah, next week we'll be watching But I'm a Cheerleader.
All right, folks. It's been great having you. Thanks for stopping by. If you want to listen to more of our content, we post on YouTube and Spotify and Instagram and TikTok, reels and long-form content. Email us also at the Holy Moment Podcast if you have any, holymomentpodcast@gmail.com if you have any recommendations for us, comments, concerns, feedback. We'd love to hear from you. With that being said, folks, good night. Stay holy.